Past 1850, as Mexico industrializes and continues to prosper, it begins to dominate the Western Hemisphere. European powers begin to recognize Mexico as a rising power and make sure to have good relations with the nation. Much like Japan of our timeline, Europeans would see that Anglos were not the only group that could dominate the world. Mexicans see the war as the best period in their history, not as the painful event it is remembered as today. In the US, Manifest Destiny is seen as a sham and a failure, and the weak nation regresses into an isolationist state. Throughout the 1800s, as Asian immigrants booms in the West Coast, Mexico continues to grow as a diverse nation. With essentially all of Central America and the western US at its command, Mexico is the largest and most populous nation in North America, engages in a form of imperialism in the late 19th century, incorporating other Latin American nations into its borders. It perhaps would also move to the Mississippi River, taking advantage of the weak U.S. During World War I, it would try to remain neutral, but like the US in our timeline, would likely be pulled into the war. Germany would engage in unlimited submarine warfare and sinks a major Mexican passenger ship, like the Lusitania of our timeline. Combined with other factors, perhaps a Zimmerman telegram to the US promising the West for if it fought Germany, the Mexican population would cry for war. The industrial might and population of Mexico helps break the stalemate in Europe and crushes the Germans. It then regresses back to isolationism. Mexico throughout the Second World War and beyond would fill much of the vacuum left by the weak United States. It grows into a superpower after the war, escaping unscathed, and becomes the dominant power in the world. Latin America enjoys an unprecedented period of growth and prosperity, and in this timeline, weak nations such as the US will be pawns in the potential Cold War scenario. In the space race, Mexico lands the first man on the moon. The Soviet Union places missiles in the US near the border of Mexico, starting a crisis similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviets and Mexicans finally reach an agreement, and with the collapse of the Soviet Union, Mexico is the only superpower in the world. It engages in operations around the world, much like the US. The US remains a small and average nation with about 170 million people, about as much as Nigeria today. Meanwhile, Mexico will have roughly a population around 330 million people. The image of the West will also be redefined. With such a powerful nation that has mainly a non-white population, many will see the West as more diverse and more representative of the world than in our timeline. Mexico would become an example of what can be achieved when people from around the world come together to work for a common goal. Its population would be a mix of mestizos, Asians, blacks, and whites, and would be even more diverse than